Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe I would like to start with a small reminder. Our society is really based on security. It all started somewhere from there. Before society was really developed, people, to be able to have security, paid taxes to have the security. For example, when they traveled to the country, they reached the small city. For entering the city, they had to pay taxes for security. It's really a key element. We also came together to be able to protect ourselves. Of course, security is not always granted, and once there is an issue, justice starts to play its role. Now, what is justice? Of course, we provide justice to be sure to give a sign towards society that justice is done, but also to make sure that the offender is not doing again the actions. But we have always the victims there. And I think the role of the victims has been often neglected. When we don't take into consideration the victim is in fact a failure. Something failed and a victim got created. If the victim is not supported rightly, it would be very difficult for this victim to reintegrate society. And if she can't do this one, the victim and also everyone around the victim, it would be a proof that something is not working. And so people might lose again trust in that society that has been built. So the reintegration of the victim is a sign that our society, our system is working properly. So in fact, what we are talking here is a fundamental issue of our society. In fact, what is the purpose for helping a victim of terrorism? What we all want to reach is very simple. It's really simple. We would like that all the victims, without any discrimination, can rebuild themselves to be able to reintegrate society as good as possible and become again, if possible, also a proud citizen of our society. That's what we try to achieve with supporting the victims. Now, rebuilding, or for a victim to work on this resilience and rebuilding themselves, it's something very difficult. To confront a victim is very difficult because, again, it's a failure. We talk with someone where the system didn't work properly. It's very difficult to confront the victim because we also identify ourselves what could happen. It's very unpleasant. We don't know always how to communicate with victims. So we have to be conscious what are the needs of the victims. And one of the key elements when you're a victim, in fact, all your education, all your values have been fragmented. And what is left over is somewhere your dignity. This is one of the last elements you still have. You still feel human being because you've got this dignity. And if people don't understand what it means, dignity, if people who try to help victims don't see what it means, you could in fact breaking down the last pillar this victim has to rebuild themselves. So the approach towards victims must be extremely important. We have to know how we do this. Simple example. I lived it myself and many other victims. People feel sad when you're a victim, and they come with pity. Never have pity for a victim, because when you have pity for a victim, you destroy his own dignity. Okay, so you really must be able to understand the victim. If the victim feels that you come with pity, for example, he will feel that, in fact, I'm not understood. And when the whole and surrounding of the victim doesn't give the right approach, even they try it, but they don't know how to do this, the victim will again feel isolated. And in fact, what do we create there? We create a fragmentation. We create a fragmentation of our society, and that's the exact opposite of what we need to do. We also, to be able to provide this right dignity from the victim, we have to be able to evaluate, identify and evaluate the damage done to the victim. Physical damage, but also emotional, psychological damage. This has to be done in a right way. If you don't do this in a right way, then again the victim will feel not understood, and it will fragment herself from society. And again, when the victim fragments herself, it's not only one person. When we have one victim, we can easily say we have in fact 10 victims, because there is the spouse, for example, the children, the whole social surrounding of the victims. They are impacted by this. When they see that the person they love can't rebuild themselves, can't reintegrate, well, they feel also the trust in society gets lost. So when we talk about one victim, in fact, we talk about many victims. So this right evaluation must be done. And so it's a very complex matter. A victim, we are all individuals. We have different needs at different times. Sometimes a need from one victim today is different than the other victim, but maybe over 10 days we have the same needs, or 1 year. It's really complicated. Try to put these things in a concrete matter. We follow a little bit what the experience from Spain, that there are 4 pillars for building the victims. It's dignity, meaning the right recognition, the right support. Also memory, that the victims are not forgotten, that we can also learn from this without re-victimizing the victim, of course. To know the truth and to have justice. Now, what is truth? That's again a very complex matter. There is not one truth. There are many truths. When a victim has an impact, as a survival instinct, often you get into a tunnel vision. You need to survive, so you get into a tunnel vision, and this becomes the reality of the victim. The reality of justice is often different. Justice is done on facts, where everything is analyzed properly, but it's not always conformed to the truth of the victims. I will give you a small example for the 22nd of March attacks in Brussels. Some victims believed strongly that there was shooting going on. During the trial, during the analysis, we understand there was no shooting going on. What happened? Some victims, they enter in tunnel vision, which is totally logic and normal, because they protect themselves, they need to turn in surviving mode. They heard noises like shootings. It seems like these were, for example, the glasses from the building in the airport which fell down. It made noise, bang, 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 bang. Then they see, during the procedures or during the acute phase, they see, for example, charges from weapons, rifles, laying on the ground. So automatically you say, here is a real danger, and there is shooting going on. This is the reality of a victim. We realized later on that these charges were, for example, from the armed forces, because the caliber, the ammunition size is different. It's NATO caliber and not from, for example, an AK-47 assault rifle. So we have different visions, but we have to respect for the victims, because they have to rebuild with their truth. They have to rebuild themselves with their own truth. So we have to respect and we have to support them in rebuilding and not confront them with something else. So the truth is really something important and yeah, difficult to understand always. Another truth, for example, is also, why is it important? Because victims have to understand, from what did I become a victim? suddenly become a victim, I have to understand, or many victims need to understand, why am I a victim of a cause? For example, 22nd of March attacks was an ISIS attack. Many victims, they heard about ISIS in the press, but in fact without really understanding how it works, who they are. So understanding of what I'm a victim is extremely important. So there also you have to do this work. I take a simple example. For example, today we all heard what is ISIS because it was quite in the press, but things are happening today, for example, also in the Congo. Most people don't understand what's going on in the Congo. The day you become a victim of one of these issues, you will start to work on it. You will want to know what's going on. And next to this truth, of course, comes justice. If, as a victim, if you know the person who harmed you is at the court, that is very good, but you also need, you also want justice for everything what stands behind it. A simple example, most of us have seen the movie The Godfather. You have the famous Don Corleone who decides to kill someone. He orders someone to kill a person. The person who is pulling the trigger, okay, we identified him, we bring him in front of justice, but if you only have this person and not the Don Corleone who ordered the killing, there is an issue. So we need to know the truth, and we need to go to the bottom line that the right justice is giving. Yes, so justice is always complicated because for sure when it happens 1 year or many years afterwards, because the victim, we do everything to rebuild. The victim is trying to rebuild themselves. Once justice comes, in fact, we are reopening the whole problematics. But still, it is one of these pillars that is necessary for the victim to rebuild. And we always say it's like a healing, a wound that has been badly healed. So when justice comes, in fact, we have to reopen the wound. We have to reopen the wound to put out the infections so it can heal properly. But there will always be the scar. We should never forget this one. So for today, we have, for example, the trial from the 22nd of March, Brussels attacks. We are almost 7 years later. It's very, very difficult, but it's necessary. It's really necessary. Even though some victims, they want to disconnect because it's too difficult for them. Yes, but for other victims, it's necessary, but also for society. We have experienced, well, I myself or the association also 4 trials. The first one was the trial from the shooting in Rue de Dries, which was from Abdeslam, when he tried to escape in March 2016 from his safe haven place. A second trial we participated was the Jewish Museum from Belgium. A third one was also the Paris attacks from the 13th November. Terrorist attacks, and the fourth one was the 22nd, well, it's right now, the 22nd of March attacks. All 4 trials were totally different. As a victim, we experienced it totally differently. The trial from the shooting from Rue de Dries is a correctional trial. It happened very fast. In fact, too fast. We didn't understand really, as a victim, what are the details about it, but judgment was done. During the trial from the Jewish Museum for Belgium, this was until now the longest trial. It took almost 3 months. It was an Assise trial. As victims, it was very difficult because the defendants tried to create the face of a complot. A complot was going on. This was their defense. And by doing this, they hurted victims from the Jewish museum, or the persons, the family members from the ones who died. It became, yeah, it was a trial where it was almost an insult to the victims. So we must understand that when you try to do a right trial, it can be very, very harmful for the victims. On the Paris attacks trials, there we all believe that the defendants worked completely with the trial, but it was not the case either. And today we have the Brussels attacks trial, which is becoming all very complicated, as we know. We heard the issues about the boxes, which is difficult for the victims because the trial was delayed. Now we hear the issues about security. We all are aware that human rights must be supported, because if you don't support the basic fundamentals from society and also the human rights, in fact, you start to play the games of the terrorists. The terrorists that want to fragmentate society. If you start to also not respect anymore the basic rules of society, you play that game, in fact. So it is extremely important for also the victims that all the basic rights of our democracy are respected. I would like maybe to read a small letter that arrived, or that was sent 1 week ago by a victim. She gave me authorization to read it, for you to understand what are issues that can happen with justice from the point of view of victims. I would just quick take my computer. Oops, let's try it. Right. Dear Madam Sir, I'm the proud wife of a victim who died in the second terrorist bombing in Zaventem on March 22nd, 2016. I've been through untold agony, and I'm not through at all. The trial that finally started on December the 6th, 2022, should bring me clarification, should give me some answers to my questions. Until February 6, 2023, I still had hope that justice would be done at the March 22nd trials. As of February 7th, that hope is completely gone, and I share the idea, along with many victims of the March 22nd attacks, that this trial is becoming a little bit like a circus. The day of the bombing started with chaos, lots of chaos, and that chaos never got resolved. Chaos because relief efforts started much too late for the second bombing at Zaventem due to poor and slow communication. Chaos from the media sending misinformation into the world. Chaos due to the crisis center that did not work at all and which employed incompetent people. Chaos because of poor coordination. Chaos because relatives were not accompanied in a humane manner and were informed far too late that their loved ones had died. Chaos because the flood of documents that the next of kin, victims who were injured, have to fill out again, and then at the end of the story, they have to beg to have their expenses reimbursed, where we have to write a cover letter to until this day as to why we should be entitled to this financial support. I no longer have any privacy. All my life and that of my husband, I have had to tell dozens of times, down to the most intimate details. Everything can be read by anyone, including the defendants, in the voluminous files from the 22nd of March attacks. My entire financial condition, even that of 3 years before the attack, has been revealed and is known by all agencies, the entire family, to every corner of the world. Emlyn, the Zaventem Airport Insurance, asked me to describe in detail what my husband and I spent our money on for the last 3 years before the attack. They asked me to copy all bank statements from those 3 years before the attacks. Amlin asked me to write a report of how do I feel. And this was 3 months after the attacks. I answered all this like a robot, which I would not do anymore now. And then finally, the trial started. I went through the information day in September, where there were detailed explanations about the building, so the infrastructure, the process itself, and the facilities. Afterwards, I thanked everyone via victims' welcome from justice for the tremendous work they did to make everyone comfortable. It is impossible to do it right for everyone, but they have done their best. I felt it like this. That the trial was postponed from October to December, for the first weeks we didn't know why, was a very hard blow for me and for a lot of victims. I was fortunate to have finally ended up with a very good therapist, read psychological therapist, just last October, because otherwise I don't know if I would still be in this world. So much for the introduction. I cry for help. On December the 1st, I received a request to come and testify on the 24th of January at 9 in the morning. My body and my brain set to that date. On 19th of January, I received an email from Justice that the date for my testimony, as well for other victims, has been moved to February 27th at 2 p.m. I was angry, disappointed, and so on. But I did everything I could to quickly get myself back together. My body and my brains were living again for that new date. On Tuesday, February the 7th, suddenly I received an email back from Justice that the new date for my testimony would be March the 9th at 2 p.m. I can tolerate very much and am understanding for many situations, but there are limits. I'm already far beyond my own limits. I can't handle this chaos anymore. From the beginning of the process, there was no structure. The planning was done far too late, and there was a planning that we see that too many people had to speak on one day, causing a cumulative delay every day. The first time there was a change in the schedule for the witnesses, that was okay for me, even though I felt it pretty hard. The second time, I still feel it narrowly acceptable, but on the third time, altering my or our testimonies, I found it an outright insult to my mental health. I feel that I've already been punished every day since March the 22nd, 2016, and I can no longer cope with the third modification. I so desperately wanted to try to tell the text I had made for my husband in front of the jury and the presiding judge. I wanted to come and testify what a wonderful, good man he was and how we lived together. The third amendment, the date of 9th of March, is absolutely not suitable for me under no circumstances. I responded within an hour of receiving the email because at the time I still thought one could be amended, or it could still be amended, but no response at all from the registry. Totally disrespectful, totally rude, I find this, or so I experienced it anyway. I find it so terrible that people like the president of the court, for whom I had a lot of respect, my lawyer, and the organization of the trial are asking, demanding that I have to justify myself again and again, that I have to give a motivation, that I have to give away part of my privacy, why I cannot come on March the 9th. I have communicated to one person, and that lady understood me completely, and I thought this would be sufficient, but it is not. In my opinion, there are two big reasons why everything is messed up. As long as they plan to invite too many people to speak on one day, it will remain an eternal chaos, and that third date for the witnesses will certainly have to be moved again and again and again. Totally unacceptable. Questioning. No one in the room who understands this, and certainly the jury for whom questioning is very important. Every time someone from the investigation judges, the fire department, DOVO, DVI, police, etc., spoke, we have to save our questions for these people. So these people are in fact witnessing, and the civil parties have to wait until the witnessings are done before asking questions. Only after everyone has spoken, meanwhile, since December 19, 2022, we would be allowed to ask our questions. Finally, on Thursday, February 9, the question began. How does one organize to call back the 10 numbered witnessings for weeks to finally answer the hundreds of questions? What normal brain can handle such a thing? I will stop here. What I try to explain is we are now many, many years further. We have learned a lot through all member states of how to approach victims. We have directives, but still on the practical side, there are issues. There are issues because I have sometimes the impressions that we are putting plasters on big ones. What is extremely important is that we bring our experience all together and work together on all levels. And only because we all play part, practitioners, decision makers, we all play part of a bigger scheme, and to reach the right of the victims, meaning supporting our society, our values. For this one, we have to cooperate all together. Everyone with his own expertise, we have to trust each other, we have to work together. I think this is extremely important. I didn't read this letter to criticize Belgium, not at all. I just read this letter because I think it's our role to bring forward what is not working. But because someone has to do it. But the whole idea is that we constructively work together. We have to learn from the mistakes from the past to build a better future for the next generations to come. That's what I want to say. Thank you.